Welcome back to Coffee with the Authors, where we decode the craft and business of writing.
This is part 2 of a 2-part episode about your early pages, the do's and don'ts. So we'll jump right in with the first tip of part 2, avoid writerly writing. Agents and editors would prefer to see the voice shine through rather than all the fancy language that you might feel compelled to put in your early pages to kind of show your writing chops. Don't do that. Your writing should be transparent. It should feel real, not writerly. You want to feel like you're with the character, and writerly writing can really detract from that. The famous mystery writer Elmore Leonard says, "If it looks like writing, I rewrite it."
So the same thing kind of applies to blocky conversations. There's a famous story, speaking of like these 60s LA writers, where Harlan Ellison looked at someone's manuscript at one point, just kind of flipped through it, and he said, "The dialogue's all wrong," and he handed it back. And the writer was like, "What are you talking about? You didn't even get a chance to read it." And he said, "I don't have to read it, just take a look at it." And he opened it up and he showed him there would be like half a page of dialogue and then a space and then 3/4 of a page of the other person talking and then, another half page of the first person talking. And he said, in real life, people don't talk like this. It's kind of a back and forth thing with short sentences, sometimes partial sentences, sometimes they interrupt each other, but it is not pontificating for 5 minutes straight in big chunky blocks back and forth. So one of the things you do not want to have in your early pages is someone giving a 2-page speech about something that you're trying to insert into the story via your characters, kind of a Mary Sue thing, and we don't want to do that either.
The next tip is to remember that transparency is your friend. You don't want to muddy up your writing with a lot of adjectives and adverbs. As we discussed in a previous video, Stephen King says, "The road to hell is paved with adverbs," or something like that. And it really is true. You get all tangled up and bogged down if there are too many adjectives and adverbs. So be transparent in your writing and you'll see it serves you well.
Next up is beware the wild attribution. In writing, there are very few times when using the word she said or he said is not the best choice. It's almost always the best choice. Now, I know that we're kind of trained not to use certain words over and over and over again within the same paragraph, but using said is kind of like having a period at the end of a sentence, or the word the. We don't notice it. It's absolutely transparent. It flows. It doesn't break up the scene while the writer tries to imagine someone sputtering agitatedly or something. So you don't want to use he exclaimed or he uttered, or in kind of a double sin, he uttered angrily. It's just clunky writing. It just looks like kind of amateur writing. If someone's upset, you should show us via the scene that you're painting here, rather than tell us he sputtered angrily. We should know if he's angry via his words and via his body language and everything that came before this. It should all come from context, not from you having to spell it out for us. 99% of the time, just stick with he said, she said.
Another tip is don't over-attribute. In other words, if you can get away with an attribution entirely, that's really very cool. It also speeds along the reading, which makes the reader enjoy the reading all the more. A tip for this is to isolate your characters. So if, let's say, you have 4 people in a group in your story, isolate 2 of them so that the conversation can go back and forth quickly, and you don't have to constantly be saying who said what. Also, if you set things up with action beats, that'll really help you minimize the number of attributions that are required. So for example, if you had a sentence like, "Mia slammed the book down. 'He's such a jerk,' she said angrily." All right, well, we already know we can dump that angrily because she slammed the book down. So that shows that she's angry. But you can also get rid of the she said. Just say, "Mia slammed the book down. He's such a jerk." You don't even need the she said because you've got Mia doing an action. So these are ways to trim things down to a place where it becomes quick reading, which helps the reader feel like they're in scene and they're moving along with the character.
Okay, here's kind of a mechanical thing, which is basically pay attention to nuts and bolts. You're not going to be in huge trouble if there is a typo on page 77 of your manuscript. But if you have 3 typos and a couple grammatical mistakes on your first page, yeah, that could be a problem, because the reader, who in this case is either an agent or an editor, along with enjoying your story, they also want to feel like you have command of the craft of writing. Especially with your early pages, your first 5, 10, 20 pages, really polish those to make sure we don't have any clunky mechanical mistakes that you could catch with a good proofread.
And our final tip for this episode is follow the submission guidelines, follow the submission rules. If you're asked to send in 5 pages, don't send in 9, even though you think that at the end of page 9, that's a great place to end this scene. Don't do that. If they ask for 5, send 5. If they ask for the first 10 pages, send them the first 10 pages. Don't send them, oh, this other 10 pages that you think is really good. Don't do that. If you think you're an exception to one of their rules, don't think that. If you do something that they asked you not to do, they will just cast aside your submission and not look at it, because really they want someone who can follow instructions. They want someone they can work with. So give them every reason to believe you are that person.
So remember, the goal here really isn't to try to come across as the most clever person on the planet or be wildly unique and kind of never seen before. It's to come across as a professional writer, and your prose is smooth, it's organic, it feels authentic, and most importantly, it doesn't get in the way of the story, because everything lives or dies based on the story.
Okay, that's it for this episode. Thanks for stopping in to have a quick cup of coffee with us. We hope you got something useful out of this and that you'll come back and see us again. Meanwhile, remember, dream big, work hard, don't give up,
and keep writing. I thought you were just picking on me.
No, I wasn't at all.
Because of my verbosity.
No, but no, not at all.
But that,
No, not
there's
at
a
all.
point there.